Ivory Coast is the sixth in a growing list of African nations cutting military ties with former colonial power France. In his 2024 end-of-year address to the country on December 31st, President Alassane Ouattara said the Ivorian government had decided to expel French troops because the Ivorian army is now effective. The president did not give any other reasons. So, is France a freak ending? And why is there a sudden urge to cut military ties with France? Here is our cover report. French military troops who have been in Ivory Coast for decades will soon be leaving, signaling more diplomatic setbacks for France amid local resentment that has caused one-time allies in West and Central Africa to sever ties with Paris. President Alassane Ouattara's recent announcement puts Ivory Coast on a growing list of African countries cutting military ties with the once greatly influential former colonial power, as some former French allies also turn to Russian mercenaries for help fighting a swarm of armed groups in the region.
We have decided on the concerted and organized withdrawal of French forces from Ivory Coast. As a result, the 43rd Bima Marine Infantry Battalion at Port Pouet will be handed back to Ivory Coast Armed Forces from January 2025.
Within days of each other in November, Chad and Senegal expelled French troops, joining several Sahel countries that had earlier done the same, starting in 2021. The wave of pushback has forced France to devise a new military strategy for the continent that officials say will be in line with the needs of partner countries. Temporary deployments rather than permanent military presence and more focus on training local forces are some features of the new policy. The 43rd Marine Infantry Battalion, Bima, a French army base located in the economic capital Abidjan, will be handed over to the Ivorian military starting from January 2025. French soldiers have been helping the Ivorian army in the fight against armed groups operating in the Sahel and expanding into countries along the Gulf of Guinea, including Ivory Coast and Ghana. France also operated as part of a United Nations peacekeeping mission during the country's long civil war from 2002 to 2011. Analysts say Ouattara's decision to cut military ties could also be political as Ivorians gear up for general elections slated for October. Ouattara, who has been in power since 2010, has not yet said whether he will seek a fourth term in the polls.
To mark this new stage in our army's life, I have decided to name this camp after General Wataha Thoma Dakian, a soldier with an exceptional career and the first ever Chief of Staff of the Ivorian Army.
France has faced unprecedented, bitter criticism from citizens in its former colonies in West and Central Africa in recent years. From Mali to Ivory Coast, thousands of people have taken to the streets in mass protests demanding that their government cut ties with Paris for good. By January 2025, 6 African countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Senegal, and now Ivory Coast, had cut military ties with France.
I have instructed the Minister for the Armed Forces to propose a new doctrine for cooperation in defense and security, involving, among other consequences, the end of all foreign military presences in Senegal from 2025.
France maintains a large military base in Djibouti, Eastern Africa. The country, also a former colony of France, hosts close to 1,500 French troops and is one of France's largest overseas military contingents. In West and Central Africa, France continues to remain a small presence in Gabon, where it has about 300 troops. Gabon's army seized power in a coup in August 2023, ending 5 years of the Bongo family's rule. However, unlike other military-led countries in the region, Paris has maintained ties with Gabon's military government, likely because of the resentment the ruling family drew. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.